Okay, yep, we're good. How's everyone feeling today?
Good.
Great. It was gorgeous.
You like ice?
No, we had literally 70 degrees today.
Oh, come on.
No snow, nothing.
You're killing me.
Yeah.
We were in ice and snow.
Yeah,
Take anything.
we've
My
had
daffodils,
snow for
everything is
24
up.
hours.
Awesome. Well,
22 degrees.
oh yeah, that's not fun. So I just want to make a couple housekeeping notes. There is a Q&A function on the bottom right side next to the chat. If you have any questions, you'll want to go in there and ask them and upvote the ones that you guys want to hear the most from, because those are the ones that we're going to highlight and they will answer on screen. There's also a chat function. You can feel free to chat in there as well. And then you might see us dropping a couple of emojis here during the chat. Just if, it's just some cool interactive features. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off.
Okay.
Kim?
Kim, you're muted. If you can just unmute yourself.
There.
You almost had it. You were there. Unmute. There you go. There you go.
Oh, there I am. So thank you. I'm Kim Davis. I'm the moderator for this evening. I am a 28-year nephrology nurse veteran. I've done home dialysis with every single piece of equipment you could ever imagine, whichever one people wanted to use. My present role is the Director of Home Therapies Operations for Rogosin Institute, New York City. I'm very excited to have this opportunity. I thank HDU, Nilce, Dawn and Jimmy, Lisa. I'm very excited to have this talk about care partners this evening. So I'll turn it off to Nilce.
Hi, I'm Nilce Gedney, and I am the Executive Director of Home Dialyzers United, but I'm not here in that capacity tonight. I'm here because I have been doing solo home dialysis for, close to 10 years. I think I started in March is my anniversary. So while we're talking about care partners and they have an incredibly important function that I really respect, I also want to just give you some facts about doing solo dialysis in case you don't have a care partner. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, who is a veteran caregiver and care partner.
Hi, I have been a caregiver, care partner for the better part of, the whole time my son's been here, 38 years. It has been a wild ride, but I entered the dialysis world 3 years ago this March, and we started home dialysis nearly 2 years ago now, and it has been an amazing ride. Jamie has multiple medical complexity and is very fragile, but dialysis at home has been a godsend for our family. And so I'm here as a caregiver, but we also partner because I think it's really important for a patient to have a voice when you are the care partner or caregiver.
Which brings us to Dawn and Jimmy, who partner beautifully.
Thank you, Nilce. Yeah, we're Dawn and Jimmy Bates from Dubuque, Iowa, and we have been on this journey since 2008. He started on dialysis. 2009, we switched to home hemo, and we love to travel. And as we travel, we advocate for other patients and care partners along the way.
Nice. So I guess that what leads us to our first question is, who are care partners? So Lisa, would you like to lead that on your experience as being a care partner and what you do?
Well, when I first started with Jamie, it was being his mom. I wanted to become involved in every aspect of his care. When we came into the dialysis world, I had already been caring for Jamie for 35 years. And yet I felt like we were starting all over again. And learning about dialysis and supporting him we were in center and he was uncomfortable. It was, we live in the Northeast. It's cold in the winter. We decided we were going to go for home dialysis, and it was a big change in his life. But being his care partner, there was a lot of, there was some training involved, but it's really been a great journey.
And what about your take on it, Dawn?
I will tell you that I have wore both hats. I feel like that the first time around with dialysis at home, that I was a caregiver doing everything for Jimmy. And when he crashed back in after his transplant had failed, I became more of a care partner because the first time around I worked full time. We had young kids in the house, and it was a lot. It was a very heavy burden on me. And I hate to say that he was a burden, but I really needed him to step up. It's his disease. It's his responsibility to own his disease. And I'm just here to help him out and support him, encourage him. And, we all know that dialysis patients are going to have a bad day. And that's when I step up. Other than that, I encourage him to do as much for himself as possible.
And that's something that we think at HDU is incredibly important. And that is that the patient owns the illness. And from that point on, you can decide how much of a care partner or partner you want involved in your treatment. I knew early on that I did not want anyone helping with my treatment. I'm very independent, kind of private. I trained under that condition. I said flat out that no one would do the training but myself. And it's been like that for 10 years. Back then, care partners were actually required. And here's a fallacy. It is not a law. It is not even a CMS regulation. The care partner requirement actually goes with the machine. So Next Stage had that requirement attached to their machine until 2017, when actually HDU went to the FDA and said, hey, this has got to go. There's too many solo people out here who want to be able to dialyze. So that was removed by 2018, and solo dialysis has been available on Next Stage since then during daylight hours. Tableau has not yet undertaken the trial necessary for that, so they are required to have a care partner with the machine. But a nephrologist, it's like a black box warning. He can override the requirement with his orders. So that's just a little bit background on solo. Do you have any more questions?
So I see a question as, what's the difference between a caregiver and a care partner? So Dawn, from your experience in the beginning, you said you were a complete caregiver, then became a care partner. So what was that experience like for you?
So like I said, the first time around, I did everything. I ordered supplies. I set up the machine. I tore down the machine. I made a batch. I hung the bags. I set up appointments. I kept his medication straight. I did everything. And doing that, I feel like because he's capable, all I'm doing is enabling him and crippling him. Yeah. Where when he crashed back in, and it was like, it's not going to be that way again. We're not doing that because I won't last it. 3.5 years, the first time, the week he got transplanted, I was calling the nurse to give up. To say, I'm done. I can't do this. Yeah, it was too much. And so then when we had to start again, we knew we would go home. But this time it was going to be different. All right. Now, Jimmy, his fistula is in a bad spot. He does not cannulate himself. But I will tell you, he's pulling his own needles. That's a step. That's a step in the right direction. He sets up the machine. He checks the chloramines. He brings the supplies in. He does his meds. He does almost everything. Mm-hmm. And so by him doing that, I don't feel like it is all on me. And I feel like we're a team. Even when we're more of a partnership. Yeah. Even when we're traveling, it's like he does his things and I do my things. But I will say that I am, we live in Iowa, and I just shared with the ladies that we got an ice storm and it's cold, and I'm a bear and I hibernate in the wintertime. So I will barter with my husband, and I will say, I'll set up your machine if you go to the grocery store, because I don't want to go outside, so it's a partnership.
Mm-hmm. How did you get, I'm just curious, how did you get Jimmy engaged to be like on board to be more of a team player with you? When he wasn't possibly feeling well, and you had your own overwhelming frustration with doing home dialysis.
That's what did it.
Like, how did the two of you kind of meet in the middle? Because it's a very interesting thing where I experienced that a lot with husbands and wives, and what for you made a difference in where, Jimmy, you had to know, like, I need to step up here.
I think we had a conversation.
Yeah, we just talked about it. And
Yeah.
she says, this is too much on me. I can't do this.
Mhm.
Yeah. And, the last thing I want is for him to go back into center, but I'm also not going to lose myself.
Right.
I find myself going, what, maybe you need to go into center, and I'm going to go get a plane ticket and go visit my bestie in New York.
So what sorts of things do you do to take care of yourself as a care partner, Dawn? Like,
Mhm. Well, I know it's going to sound ridiculous, because 99% of the things that I do have to do with the kidney community, and it feeds my heart. It feeds my soul. Being involved, doing webinars like this. We spoke earlier today for the National Kidney Foundation. But taking time, because I'm part of a care partner support group, and these people, I'm not kidding, I would be so lost without them. We meet on Zoom every other week. I can call them anytime, day or night. And if there's a crisis going on, or if I'm just upset, or if I want to celebrate something, and these ladies are available all the time. And that's how it's been for the last 3 years.
So I think on the chat, there's some difference between like really defining what a caregiver is versus what a care partner is. And I think they're two totally separate things, right? Because Lisa's in one position and Dawn's in another. So, Lisa, share more of your experience as being a complete care partner.
Well, Jamie was born in 1985, and he was a preemie. So I started caregiving and as mom, and I've been caregiving now. It'll be 39 years in April. Mm-hmm. And so the burnout, there is a real danger of burnout. And I think at some point you make peace with your situation when you are a full caregiver and you find things you like. You always have to keep, I guess my best piece of advice I say to people is keep a peace for yourself. And that's a really hard thing to do when somebody depends on you 24/7. As Jamie got older, we had some nursing in the home, but at the start of the pandemic, when he crashed into dialysis, it was the week of the shutdown. As the whole world was shutting down, we were crashing into dialysis, and we were the only patient at a major Boston hospital receiving dialysis, trying to figure out where to put us in probably one of the hardest, most difficult times in healthcare. And so we ended up going in center. We were in the isolation room because he has a primary immune deficiency as well. And we would get up at 4:00 in the morning, my husband and I, and get him ready. And I would get him in the truck, and Jamie and I would go. He'd have his dialysis. When everybody else was coming in at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, we were leaving. We were on the way out the door. So we were there with the nurses during setup. And we decided, that's when we decided we started talking about home. And it was actually our nephrologist who suggested it to us because we run a mini ICU at home for Jamie. Mm-hmm. Said, are you interested in home dialysis? You might be a good candidate to do this. And I was going to school at this time, and I was desperately trying to graduate. So as soon as I graduated, I literally thought I was going to have a few weeks off. And then I found out there was one machine left. And if I wanted to start training, I could start that Monday. So I had a day and a half off. and then started training on the next stage. And we were home in probably like 2.5 to 3 weeks, doing our first dialysis at home. I think what I wasn't prepared for is in other specialties and in other places, you can do things and it gets more and more perfect. But in dialysis, you have your good days and your bad days. And I had to really learn. The Home Dialysis United group on Facebook was really helpful to me, connected me with Neil J and different people. I think that was important because that really gave me a barometer of where I was, because I wanted every day to be perfect. And in dialysis, it's not perfect. It's very up and down sometimes. It's very much you find your rhythm for the day.
It's an amazing story, Lisa. And Dawn and Jimmy, you're like on two different perspectives with what you've done and how much, where you've come from and how you've gotten home. And, Jimmy, I love the fact that you like finally realized your wife needed help.
I just noticed an interesting comment in the chat, and someone asked about how close do you have to remain with the patient if you are a care partner, and there is absolutely no requirement. And over the years with HDU, we've heard of just tons and tons of various accommodations that people have come up with. Mainly they do it for their own peace of mind, but nobody has made them, check in or sit. And we've heard it all. I've heard that, the care partners have been told that they can't move from the patient. They have to sit in front of them the entire time, their job to do everything. The really good one is when they were told, if you want to do nocturnal, then someone has to stay up all night and watch you. None of that is true.
No.
So, if you're concerned, especially that first year starting out, there's a lot of insecurities that make it kind of difficult. But so if you're concerned and you want to just sort of touch in, but go fix dinner, do the laundry, people carry a baby monitor. And that way you can hear if an alarm goes off, you can hear, if he needs a cup of water or something. And that's been a good solution. Some people have even actually left it with the neighbor next door and they've gone off to the grocery store because, again, there is no real legal requirement or regulation for care partner. This is something that you do together, just as Dawn and Jimmy have done as a partnership. And unless in Lisa's situation, and I can actually really empathize with her because as a solo dialyzer, I don't get a break either. I mean, there's nobody, there's like the few times I've been in the hospital and come home, I'm like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. And that every single time my machine is broken down, guess when? The day I get out of the hospital. So, I'm trying to figure out how to fix it and I'm weak and I'm sick and I'm like, this just really sucks. And I don't have anybody to turn to. So I totally get, Lisa, and I don't know how you do it without, how do you get a break? I mean, when that happens to me, I just step back and say, you know what, I'm going to make that treatment up tomorrow. The next day I'm going to sleep. I can deal with it later. Health-wise, I can handle that. Everybody can deal differently by checking with their medical professionals. But Lisa, I don't know how I would do, 24/7 without any break. That is an amazing accomplishment. And we have many, many people who do that with loved ones who are completely debilitated in one way or another. And I admire you and all of them, everybody who is in this, position. But it's to be 24/7 is pretty tough.
Well, I have to say that I could not do what I do without my husband. I met him when Jamie was almost 3 years old, and he's been with us every step of the way. The other day we had to take his bedroom and rip it apart and move it because he never wanted dialysis in the bed. He wanted it in the recliner. And because of a back issue, now wants to do his dialysis in the bed. And we literally moved the machine, the table over to the bed and did this half system. And then when we were done, we realized this was probably going to be the way it was. And we had to rearrange the ICU, literally. I felt like I was in a hospital room trying to shove equipment and figure out rooms. He has a CPT vest. He has a lot of other equipment in his BiPAP. He has a lot of things in there. And, but I could not do what I do without my husband. And my older son, who just turned 40, is Jamie's co-guardian. And so if I need somebody to run to the store, or, you know, Mark has to travel, I have backup there. And then Jamie's younger brother still lives at home. He's in his 20s and he's 6'2", so he can help lift those big oxygen tanks and things like that. But you have to I take little breaks. And I say to the people that have to do, you know, the more intense, sometimes your break looks like 15 minutes out on the front porch in the sunshine, or, you know, a chapter in a book. It looks very different.
Mm-hmm.
As they say, it takes a village, and I think we all have to create our own village.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm wondering how, you know, with the benefits of doing home dialysis, you know, that the benefit of doing home dialysis is a very forgiving therapy. You know, if it's nope, not today, or it didn't quite happen the way I wanted it to happen, you can just say, oh, for another day. You know, so I'm just curious, like between, you know, Dawn and Jimmy and Lisa, like have you ever had a day where everything's been so overwhelming where you just said, well, we can just stop whatever for today and we can move on, because with home dialysis, you know, you can just move on to the next day without skipping a beat and give yourself a break from what you're doing as well.
I apologize. I'm having camera issues here. But I do want to say that, yeah, we have had times when we've had a very busy day. We had some family issues going on. We were out of town and didn't get home till late. And it's like, you know what? We're just not going to do it today. And as Nelche knows, my husband dialyzes 7 days a week because he chooses to. So that also gives us the freedom to be able to say, nope, we're not going to do it today.
Yeah.
You've got plenty of wiggle room.
Right.
And I travel quite a bit with my job at HDU. And so on travel days, it's pretty hard. If my treatment day falls on a travel day, you know, I can't guarantee that I'm going to, you know, get up at 6, get to the airport, travel across country, get everything set up in the hotel room and do a treatment that night. It just probably isn't going to happen. But I can do it the next day, you know, and I do it when I go to conferences. You know, while everybody else is at lunch, I might sneak out and go do a treatment. And the beauty of home is, my gosh, you know, if you're doing it right, I can do that treatment and get up and walk out the door and be in a meeting and, you know, do what I have to do every day. And that's the beauty of home, is that freedom, that flexibility. And you, Lisa, you have, you know, Jamie to take care of. So every day presents a different set of issues. Dawn, you have, you travel and everything, as you said. We have that ability to change it up. and that to me is worth everything. And when I lived 5 minutes for my grandkids, and I could get a call and say, hey, can you grab the kids, take them out for dinner? You know, my daughter was working late. You know, if it was a treatment night, no big deal. I could do it. You know, I can remember the first time I said to the clinic when I was in center, you know, before training, I said, I can't come in this weekend because I had friends coming from France. They said, you can't do that. And I said, well, watch me. I mean, I just couldn't fathom that. You know, somebody else was telling me what to do with my life. I was 65 years old. You know, I'd pretty much earned the right to do what I wanted. But that's why home dialysis works for me. And, you know, again, for solo, there is no requirement. And I'm very comfortable at home. The first year, as I said, was really ups and downs, and you have a settling in process. And after that, it's easier than brushing my teeth.
Mm-hmm. And I think that in the chat, there's a lot of people as well who talk about peritoneal dialysis as an option for them. And, you know, I think that some of their comments about the ease of use of peritoneal dialysis and, you know, or home hemodialysis, it's just the path that's meant for you and the path that's meant to fit into your life and provide you with the best outcomes that you can have. But I don't want to discredit peritoneal dialysis as, you know, an option for a lot of people who can easily perform dialysis at home as well. And also to your comments and questions about being on solo dialysis, peritoneal dialysis is the simplest form of dialysis you can do. And whether you pick peritoneal dialysis or home hemodialysis, they're equally safe at home. And many programs, depending on what program you are in, have solo dialysis options. So, and a further comment earlier was about having the best, education you can around what your modality options are. And I think that's very important to have someone who's going to sit and listen to you and understand your home situation and what your needs are. Like, maybe Lisa's, needs, and coming forth. And during COVID, it was like a very important time because, the burden of taking someone to a dialysis unit and then, but the benefits, the medical benefits of what you were assisting and doing for your loved one are equally as important. So I think that, no matter where you start on the dialysis journey, that your education level, your education about understanding all your options, reaching out to different websites like Home Dialysis United, like all these other support groups you have online, can be very beneficial in finding the right program for you that will benefit you and have you on a path to enjoy your life or achieve your life goals.
And one thing we like to basically talk about with PD is it's a wonderful option for people starting out. And, it is gentle on the body. It can help you retain your residual. You can do it either with a partner or alone. It is safe if done, very strict aseptic technique. But PD can be hard on the body too, and it doesn't necessarily last the entire life of your journey on dialysis, and it may not sustain you. So it's important to go into PD understanding that somewhere down the road, hopefully you might get a transplant. PD is a great bridge to transplant. But if the transplant doesn't come in time, you want to make sure that you have other alternatives that you've explored or are exploring based on your what's happening in your life at that time. And that's another really important thing about care partners and being at home, and is that it's going to change. During your lifetime in the journey with dialysis, you're going to have many different options. You might get a transplant, it might fail. You might have to go back to home dialysis, you might get to go back to PD. There's so many different combinations. So it's important to really get that education. If somebody just says, here, go home on PD, don't just sit there and listen, take that one for granted. Start exploring and learning about all your options. If your clinic hasn't explained it to you, ask them, tell them you want to learn more. Because over our lifetime, we're going to need probably a full gamut of treatments. I think, wouldn't that be true, Kim?
Yeah, very much so. But, you can run the timeline of doing everything at home as an option for you, even into palliative care. I saw a message on the chat that really stood out to me. Angelica said that she was talking about possibly a care partner experiencing anxiety going into their family members only in CKD, and how not to worry about them and, the thoughts that arise. And, for Angelica, like what I would say is, find a program that has a very good CKD education program and support system. There's many programs that have it. We have something at Rogerson called the P program. We follow patients throughout the duration of, their CKD illness and have support groups, a staff psychologist, all those things that will support you on your journey toward, whether you need treatment or not. Dialysis isn't the only option because you can end up pursuing transplant before you even need dialysis, or even medical preventative care before you need to go on dialysis. So you have many different options than, dialysis, in general, but sitting down and talking to a healthcare professional about home dialysis, and particularly, I think would kind of ease your mind about, you know, how it's not as scary as you think, but it's a task that the nurses are there with you 100% of the time, one-on-one, right? Lisa, Dawn, you can Nelche, and they have 24-hour care, you know, support care. We have a monitoring program for solo dialysis patients where they can be viewed by a tech. Their machine is communicating both, you know, different types of machines, including next stage, you know, that we can see you running in real time. So a care partner can go to sleep and we can watch your loved one online. And, you know, if everything's going well, then no need to wake you up. If something happens, then there's a person on the other line right away. So there's so many options available to you where it doesn't have to be an anxiety ridden thing. But I understand that it can be really scary, you know, from, you know, your perspective, Angelica, being a family member who seeing your family member going through this process and, you know, not having as much information as you need.
I think someone asked if solo dialysis was safe, and I'm actually going to broaden that to home dialysis is relatively safe. I mean, they don't collect data on adverse events and infections specifically for home, but anecdotally, most of us, you know, have been doing this a while. Kim probably can add to that.
Yeah.
Home infections in the home are much less likely to happen if you're following the technique that your clinician, your nurse has taught you, than they are in center or in hospitals, because they're like germ, gardens for germs. I mean, they're just growing. Whereas in your home, for the most part, it's germs your body knows. And so you're good. And so we don't see a lot of massive infections. Unfortunately, a lot of people get them in the hospital, then they are home, and then at that point, those infections can recur. But technique-wise, again, that first year can be your adjustment year. And so we always tell the newbies, you're going to have some ups and downs. You're going to have some rough days. We all, you know, I'm not going to minimize it. I've had a few bloodbaths in my lifetime. None of them were dangerous. Okay. They were a little annoying. I mean, I didn't necessarily like cleaning up, but you learn from your mistakes. And, you know, I now triple check all my clamps, you know, and make sure that everything is running. And you still can have an off day. But for the most part, I will take any one of those off days for the freedom that I have to do my life the way I want. So solo is safe. 10 years, I've had no infection in the home, no adverse events that other than the first year. And that was just well, it was really stupid. I couldn't get my needle out. It got stuck. And I had to call my local EMTs. And they kind of came in laughing because I know them. And, you know, I said, what do you want me to do? And I said, can you take my needle out? I mean, you're one-handed. And so that's probably the one issue with solo. You're one-handed, and sometimes you can be a little limited. So you really want to make up. I've come up with a lot of little tricks and tips for putting in the needles, taking them out, you know, and everything to avoid just that kind of an issue. But once in 10 years, I mean, I think they kind of miss me at the local fire station.
I mean, in my practice, we've had about 25 to 30% of our patients doing home dialysis with a catheter. A lot of them are just not candidates for a fistula, or they may have a preference for not having, you know, a fistula. But, you know, those patients do really well. And to what Neeltje said, the infection rate is enormously low. We have less than like maybe even one infection per year. You know, majority of them is some technique break, which, you know, the patients know, you know, I should be wearing a mask or something like that. And, you know, but it's very few and far between. And I would say from the monitoring perspective on like solo dialysis, you know, we've had 0 911 calls. And I think that's really important to say because, you know, everyone says, oh, solo is not safe. But, you know, the nurses guide you on what treatment parameters to use to where it is safe for fluid removal, for things like that. So, I don't want anyone out there to hear the message that solo is unsafe, because we have probably anywhere from 10 to 15 patients in our program that are solo. And we have patients that seek out our program because we do solo dialysis, because they're not being afforded that option of access in their area. So they need a little more support. We'll have more than one person, in communication with them. I've brought patients in and, 7 o'clock at night, they're calling me, which is fine, because I want them to feel successful in what they're doing, because they have goals in their life and they want to go back to work. They want to be productive. They want to feel normal. And there's no reason why we cannot provide that for anyone. So, Nilce knows me for many years. And if there's someone who approaches me about doing home dialysis, it's like, how do we get it done? It's not a question of no.
Right. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I know for us that, we have done a lot of advocacy work and talked to many patients, many nurses, many even doctors. And sometimes it's very upsetting when we're doing an event and a nurse comes out and looks at a list of potential home patients that are interested in more information, and they're like, nope. And
Yep.
I really get infuriated, because I'm like, seriously, you did not just do that.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting too, Dawn, is you see someone at their baseline on 3 times a week dialysis. That's not their best.
Right.
They're not coming at you at their best because they're getting the minimal dialysis that they need to stay alive. You're not really seeing, like, even putting someone in transitional care, or even trying out the therapy for like 2 weeks to see what the person's really like. So it's almost putting them at a loss, because, they're just getting the minimal amount of dialysis and kind of saying they're interested in the home therapy, but give them a couple of weeks to try it out. We even say, like, if you want to try it out for a couple of weeks and you don't like it, that's fine.
That's how I get Jimmy home.
That's fine. And transitional care has been, like, amazing for a lot of people across the country, because, they're getting more frequent dialysis. But when and Dawn, and Jimmy, I used to be a sales rep for NextStage. So, so I know your pain when you're talking to people. But the one thing is, I say that you don't see someone you're not seeing someone at their best. You're seeing someone at their minimal amount of effort to say there may be hope for me.
Correct. And we always ask, what are your dreams? What do you want to do? Right. If you weren't stuck to this machine and this 3-day-a-week schedule, what would you do with the energy you would have?
Right.
Because, when my husband was in center, when Jimmy was in center, he didn't have the energy nor the stamina to do anything. Right. He came home, and that dialysis day was all about dialysis and recovery. Mm-hmm. Now he can finish his treatments and drive 300 miles pulling a 30-foot camper.
So the answer is, what matters to you? And that's what the clinicians should be asking you before you start anything. What matters to you? Is it at 70, what matters to me is going to be a lot different than someone starting in their 20s and 30s. I mean, let's be real. But I still want to stick around and see my granddaughter get married. And, no, I'm not traveling quite as much as I did. I think I've cut down from, 2 weeks a month to 1. But, again, what mattered? Travel was incredibly important to me. I was not going to stop. And I could not do that with in-center dialysis. So that's a really key question to answer.
And what does it really come down to now? I mean, really, is it really about the dialysis, or is it about quality of life?
Yeah. Quality of life to me trumps it all.
Absolutely.
For me too.
Yep.
And the other question that a lot of professionals will say, just as you said when you're talking with them, they'll ask about who is a good candidate? Well, our reply is there's no bad candidate for home. Pretty much anybody can do home dialysis. We've had people in wheelchairs, people who are blind, people who have literally stubs for fingers have been able to self-cannulate. If there's, it's mind over matter. If there's a will, there's a way. But, and my answer at one point was, I think possibly the only person who can't do home would be someone who's homeless. And I got proven wrong because there was a PD patient who was homeless and she was managed to do her PD. So, we can't be stuck with these blinders and roadblocks. Everybody should start with the premise that they can do home. And then you start working down the list of educational criteria.
Right.
And as we all know that when, we first start this, it is very overwhelming. It is. And we're given a whole lot of information. And we're probably only hearing 10% of it. And we're probably hearing it wrong because we're so overwhelmed with what's going on. So that's why it's so important to be educated. It's so important to, push the limits, challenge the doctors. It's okay. It's all right to challenge your doctor. Now she can truly say she knows because her and I have had conversations about blood flow rate. When we first started, Jimmy was running at 450. He's got 2 stents in his heart, one in his fistula. Why would I do that? I want him to live a long time. So let's slow down that blood flow rate. Let's extend his life. Right. Yes. Did I cry the first time that I cannulated my husband? Absolutely, I did. But you know what? I look at it now, and every time I cannulate him, I'm extending his life.
Yep. And Lisa can tell you about challenging the doctors. I'm sure she's got a couple stories.
I like that.
Communication, teamwork. Today was a kind of come to Jesus meeting with one of Jamie's doctors, and in a good way, because I think sometimes we think we're communicating well, and they think they're communicating well, and we're talking at each other, and we're not really listening. And what I discovered today, again, was that I hadn't slept real well in the last week. And we've had, a few things with Jamie's back. So I didn't communicate as well as I could have. But also, they were looking at Jamie in a different light on a good day, not necessarily his bad day. So a lot can be done with communication, but ask the questions and don't be bashful. I have to add, we were actually candidates for PD, and we were supposed to go have the catheter placed, and Jamie crashed. He had a lung infection, and we got bumped, and then he crashed, and they decided to go with hemodialysis because we really didn't have time to prepare surgically for PD. And somebody said, that must have been so disappointing. And in that moment, we thought we knew what we wanted, but I was glad we knew a little bit more about our choices because really hemo was where we needed to be with his other medical issues and being able to really fine tune things for him. We have a next stage at home, and we have issues with the town water. So we have the bags come to the house, which has been a great thing for him. But I really think that it's important to ask a lot of questions. If you're nervous about what to expect with dialysis, ask to go see a dialysis unit. It was actually offered to us when I started saying, well, where would he be and where do you think he's going to go? That all was done ahead of time. We were able to kind of prepare him as well. And then he was able to make that decision. And that's where I was more his care partner than his caregiver. I asked him right out because he's not a candidate for a transplant with his other issues. And I said to him, what do you want to do? And he says, I want to fight. I want to go fishing. And Jamie loves to go fishing. So in that respect, I was his care partner, not his caregiver. He made that final decision. Let's do this.
I see that there's a question there on how you can prevent or assist the care partner burnout. And we all know that care partner burnout is a very real thing. I've been crispy a few times in my life. And, I think it's different for everybody. For me, taking a 10-minute bath and soaking in the tub and just listening to music and just being still. That helps to revitalize me. I don't need to take a week's vacation away from my husband and just go do it. I don't need to do that. I would worry about him. I wouldn't enjoy my vacation. Seriously. But I do know that there are people that's what they need to do. They need to take a trip. They need to go get that manicure or pedicure. They need to go have coffee with a friend. Whatever is going to get you centered, walk away from the treatments, from, the thing is that our whole, I just feel like dialysis is such a very small part of our life, even though it's a really big part of our life. Sitting down to do dialysis is truly the least stressful part of my day.
That is so true. I mean, I literally, having now been on close to 10 years, I call it my Zen moment. So I like to do it in the evening, finish my day, work, whatever, go in. I have a separate room for it. And when I get on and everything is like in perfect line or the chi is working, I go into my coma. It's my Zen moment. And it is just such an amazingly relaxing, tranquil feeling. And when I try to describe that to clinicians, they look at me like I'm crazy. But that's what I mean about home dialysis, and care partners. You can see the differences in treatment. So sometimes to lower that blood flow. Sometimes that you might need to lower the UFR. It's just, pulling too fast, too hard. You can't do that in center as easily as you can do it at home because your body. So when everything's in perfect alignment, like that Zen moment, and it feels great. And that's something that at home, that's to me one of the biggest advantages of being at home is that, like Dawn, you said, it's so relaxing. It's the best part of the day.
We also do Reiki. Jamie has virtual Reiki, and we have a local person she calls us, and we do Trish Matthews and local to us, and it's been phenomenal for Jamie. He can meditate with a story. She's great with all different ages, and he can meditate with a story and relax, or another day he wants to watch wrestling. And, so I can take the iPad, which is amazing. From my next stage, I could take the iPad and I can actually maybe empty the dishwasher or read a book, sit in a different space, can still kind of keep my eye on him. I can be looking right at his numbers, looking at everything, even if he falls asleep. If you have to, run to the bathroom or answer the door for UPS, I can kind of take the vitals with me and be in another room. So those things are so important.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, a great question. Kim, somebody just asked about crashing.
Well, that's the most common form of starting dialysis now, isn't it?
65%, as a matter of fact.
It's really interesting because we have a lot of people who go into like our CKD programs and, it's a long timeline, and then all of a sudden they kind of swirl off and disappear. Or they're fearing dialysis, or they start skipping appointments because they may not feel so bad, I think, at first, but prolonging that timeline and not taking classes or not being educated is definitely at your disadvantage. It doesn't mean that it won't happen. I think a lot of people fear like the version of dialysis versus I say it's not about dialysis, it's about wellness. So, you're getting the wrong picture, but starting dialysis is an enormously scary thing for people. And at some point we get a percentage of people who kind of fall off the wagon. Like, this isn't happening to me. It's denial, or, they're not really medically managing themselves well. And eventually they end up on, crash start dialysis. But luckily for us in our practice that our nephrologists are really good about educating people at the bedside in the hospital to encourage the home start. So whether it's peritoneal dialysis, home dialysis, we have a hospital start program too, because, there's just a funnel of people that it's reality. People are not all going to attend CKD classes every single month with an enthusiasm that they're going to start dialysis. I think that's unrealistic. I think that people fear loss of themselves, their identity. I think that they fear loss of their lives, meaning like I can't go back to work or my life is going to change. And I think a lot of people think I'm going to die is the biggest, thing in the back of their mind. Like, this is so scary. Like, I don't know what's going to happen to me. So, as soon as the team can rope them back in, that's great. But it's a reality that people just are avoidant. And in socioeconomic areas where the access is poor, they don't have, access to different things, it's even worse. So when you're saying like 65% crash start dialysis, where I am in lower socioeconomic areas and different populations, it's probably more like 85%.
Yeah.
Because of fear of healthcare, fear of health providers, bad experiences with healthcare providers where they've had even a vaccination when they were like 6 years old, and it was so traumatic that they fear any kind of health provider, and they're the ream of their life at that point. So, while things can be a standard, they're even worse in some areas.
But there's also the fear of needles.
Yeah.
I've had people say that the minute they found out there were needles involved, they wanted, they're like, how can you put a needle in your son's arm? He has a fistula and a graft, and it's like a loop. It was custom made because we had some, issues with that as well. And it works great now, but people look at it and say, how do you use that? But the other thing on the crash, for us, we were seeing the nephrologist on a regular basis, and we were tracking my son very carefully, but his body decided when we thought we had about 6 months, we were looking at September of 2020 was kind of the target of when we would probably have to start dialysis. Well, his body decided it was going to be March, 6 months earlier. And so his numbers just changed. We still don't know why, but they changed on their own when we got to a certain place. So I think for us, the crash was unnerving, but it wasn't as scary because we had an open conversation with the doctor going. And I called and, we got him in, we got labs done, and she's like, this is what's happening. And we kind of addressed it from there. So it's when you are even with a physician, sometimes things happen, but I think having had somebody there and trying to learn about it in the beginning made that crash, so to speak, not as frightening.
Yeah.
So we had supports.
So can I address, there's a question in the chat from Dale, because I'm really concerned if somebody says like, what's the symptoms of a crash, that, I don't want that person to be without like understanding that they're actually crashing. So, there's a difference between like a slow kind of progression and then something that's really immediate. So something that would be immediate that you need to seek hospital care would be signs of like shortness of breath, or, fluid, or, swelling in your legs, or, general tiredness, nausea, vomiting, something really unusual. The other thing that a lot of people don't understand is when you get to this point of crashing, it could lead to a heart attack or a stroke. So, signs and symptoms of having those sorts of things, but, and waiting until it's too late is definitely not the right point at that point. So if you are not sure and not feeling well, then you should seek medical care as soon as possible. That was how I would like to address that, because
so they actually call kidney disease the silent killer, because most people don't even know that they have kidney disease. And so those people tend to, have some of the symptoms that Kim just talked about, and they go to the emergency room with flu-like symptoms. They, just feel bad and they think they're going to get a shot or something and go home. And the ER now says your kidneys are shutting down and you're going on dialysis. So that's a true crash. The other people, like myself, had my head in the sand. I did not want to know anything about dialysis for 20 years with CKD. I knew I had issues with my kidneys, did everything I could to protect them. We watched it, and as it started to get worse, I just ignored it. I was not going to deal with it. In fact, I had decided that I would just go into hospice. But, that another whole story there.
Mhm.
I'll never forget when I went to the doctor with my 95-year-old mom, and he looked at her and he said, whatever you're doing, keep on doing it. And then he looked at me and he said, last time I saw a person with labs that bad, they were in a coma. And 3 months later, I crashed into the ER with needing dialysis. And, I'm completely guilty. So I tell people, do as I say and not as I do. Start educating yourself early. Learn what matters to you. Get over the fear, because I was frozen with fear, and that's the biggest deterrent.
Well, and Nelsha, there's so many people that don't even realize. My husband is a prime example. When he was young, he had high blood pressure. He didn't like the way the meds made him feel. And instead of advocating for himself and saying,
Yep.
hey, I don't like how these meds make me feel, he stopped taking them. His feet started to swell. No big deal. You loosen your bootstraps. If it don't hurt, you don't worry about it. True guy thought. Okay.
I thought I
Yep.
was just
Right.
I thought I was getting
So
fat.
he went to the eye doctor because he was having some fuzzies. He couldn't see good. So he went to the eye doctor. They looked in his eyes, they took his blood pressure and said, you need to go to the ER right now. And his blood pressure was dangerously high. He got to the ER. They put him up on the cardiac unit right away. And he started dialysis the next day, but not before having a TIA.
Mhm.
Wow.
So everybody's different, but yes, there are common symptoms that can occur. So, there's so many people that don't even know that they have kidney disease until it's too late.
Exactly.
No, it's true. It's like a statistic that about 500,000 people end up with like some form of CKD. But, and it's not a pleasant joke to say that 400,000 people or more end up on dialysis is kind of like winning the lottery. But what happens between segment A with CKD, and then all of a sudden you have 400 to 500,000 people that end up on dialysis? Well, you don't know what the determinant was, but a lot of people that waited too long or avoid treatment end up not in a pleasant spot where they're crash starting. They don't end up in a port where things are even have an option at that point. So it's the reality that, there's millions of people with CKD that, need the education and need the reaching out, and people are fearful in doing this. But from 3 to 4 million people, maybe only 400,000 end up on dialysis. And that's a staggering number, because they could have had options for kidney transplant. They could have had better options in managing themselves. And there's a lot of preventative health messages, with diabetes, hypertension, that they never even had access to. So for people who are on the webinar who are interested, I see a few questions about CAPD. I put out information on our website just to give them more information. You really need to get in touch with someone who can give you more education, in your area. And if you're being seen by a nephrologist, you should be asking them questions now, about your option, and exploring what might be ahead of you. And 25% of our patients don't even end up on dialysis. They get a kidney transplant before they even end up on dialysis. So that could be presentably an option for you to get listed on a kidney transplant list before you even need dialysis.
So we hope everybody is enjoyed tonight, and meeting our care partners and learning about the different roles that we all have. And if you have enjoyed it, leave a nice comment in the chat. Also tell us what you want to learn more about. And we'll be doing these every month for the next year. And then we also have our summit again in September. So we want to make sure that all of the content is presenting information that you guys want to hear about. So, feel free to give us some suggestions. in the chat. We can stay and talk among yourselves for a little bit. But we want to thank our partners here today, Lisa and Dawn and Jimmy and Kim, and for just a wealth of information. And we hope you've enjoyed it.
We will be leaving the chat open for another 15 minutes. Thank you everybody for joining us.